Welcome to this explainer. Roughly 2,800 years ago, the legendary blind poet Homer dropped what is basically the ultimate ancient sequel to his first epic, the Iliad. While the Iliad was all about the brutal fall of Troy, this second epic completely flips the script. We're zooming in on the ultimate cunning hero, Odysseus. Yep, the absolute mastermind behind the Trojan Horse. The guy beat the massive odds, he won the war, and honestly, now all he wants to do is just go home. But as we're going to see, surviving a massive war is one thing. Surviving the actual commute home, that is an entirely different beast.
So, that brings us to the core question we're tackling today. How exactly does a legendary hero survive 10 solid years of terrifying monsters, vengeful gods, and deadly witches, just to get back home? Because standing between Odysseus and his beloved wife Penelope, not to mention his son Telemachus, is a monumental, almost unbelievable scale of threats. We are literally talking about the most terrifying nightmare-fuel creatures known to the ancient world.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of his absence, let's just look at this timeline for a second. At 0 years, he leaves his family for the Trojan War. 10 years in, okay, Troy is finally conquered. But it is going to take him another grueling 10 years to make his final return to Ithaca. That's a 20-year absence. That relentless ticking clock is the heartbeat of this entire story, and it adds this immense crushing pressure to literally every single mistake he and his crew make along the way.
So, let's dive into Chapter 1. The journey begins. Odysseus gathers his victorious fleet on the Trojan shores, leaving the ruined city behind. I mean, he won, right? What could possibly go wrong?
Well, pretty much everything. What's supposed to be a super quick supply run in Issamara instantly turns into a disastrous battle. Odysseus and his men get ambushed by a massive tribe called the Laestrygonians, forcing them into this panicked retreat right back to their ships. Then, just as they're getting close to home, boom! A massive storm erupts. They get blown completely off course, they're hopelessly lost, and they end up landing on the mysterious island of the Lotus-Eaters.
Now, what's really fascinating about the Lotus-Eaters is the actual nature of the threat here. It's not some giant monster with razor-sharp teeth. Nope, it's the lotus fruit itself, which is basically a powerful drug. Anyone who eats it just falls asleep, forgets their entire past, and loses absolutely all desire to ever go home. It brilliantly illustrates the very first major psychological threat of the journey, which is amnesia and total complacency. Luckily, Odysseus catches on quickly to the sinister hospitality, literally drags his sleeping crew back to the ships, and forces a super narrow escape. Which leads us straight into Chapter 2, the Cyclops and Poseidon's Curse. Running seriously low on supplies, Odysseus and a small search party stumble into this huge cave just packed with cheese and meat. Sounds great, right? Except the cave belongs to Polyphemus, a giant, man-eating Cyclops, and Polyphemus quickly seals the entrance with a massive boulder, trapping them inside, and just starts eating the men, 2 by 2. So, how do you escape an unkillable giant when you're trapped behind a boulder you physically cannot move? Well, you use your intellect. Odysseus comes up with this brilliant puzzle-like heist. Step 1, he offers the giant some incredibly strong wine to get him dead drunk. Step 2, when the giant asks for his name, Odysseus cleverly says he's called Nobody. Step 3, once the giant passes out, they blind him with a sharpened, glowing hot wooden stake. But they still can't move that boulder, which leads to Step 4. The next morning, when the blind giant rolls the boulder back to let his flock out to graze, Odysseus and his men escape by literally tying themselves underneath the bellies of the sheep. Absolutely genius. And honestly, this setup gives us one of the absolute greatest moments of dark humor in all of ancient literature. When Polyphemus is blinded, he's screaming in agony, which draws all the other Cyclopses on the island to the outside of his cave. They're yelling, asking who is hurting him, and he yells back, "Nobody is killing me, nobody." Hearing that, the other Cyclopses just figure he's perfectly fine, or maybe struck by some disease from the gods, so they leave in utter confusion. The trick worked exactly as Odysseus planned. But right in his moment of triumph, as they're sailing away to safety, Odysseus makes a massive, fatal mistake. Hubris, excessive pride. He just can't help himself. He yells out to the giant, revealing that his true, famous name is actually Odysseus. By doing that, he handed the defeated monster the one exact piece of information he desperately needed.
Because you see, Polyphemus isn't just some random giant. He happens to be the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea.
Armed with Odysseus' real name, Polyphemus prays to his dad, and this sparks a devastating curse. Odysseus is going to lose all of his crew and wander the seas for 10 long, agonizing years before he ever sets foot in his homeland again. This one curse literally sets the stage for the entire rest of his nightmare voyage. Moving on to Chapter 3, Witches, Sirens, and Monsters. Buckle up, because this is easily the darkest, most perilous stretch of the whole cursed timeline.
The real heartbreak of this curse is just how tantalizingly close they actually get to salvation. King Aeolus gives Odysseus this incredible gift, a leather bag containing the power of the winds to speed his journey home. Guys, Ithaca is literally in sight. They can see the shores. But the crew's greed takes over. Convinced the bag is secretly stuffed with gold, they tear it open while Odysseus is catching up on some sleep. All those trapped winds instantly rush out, blowing their ships entirely back to where they started. Aeolus realizes these guys are clearly cursed by the gods, and he straight up exiles them.
What follows is just a rapid-fire succession of absolute nightmares. First, they run into the Laestrygonians, these giant cannibals who pelt their fleet with massive boulders, destroying every single ship except for the one Odysseus is on. Then, they land on the island of Circe, a beautiful witch who uses her magic to turn his crew into literal pigs. Using a magic herb called moly that the god Hermes gave him, Odysseus manages to overpower her, saves his men, and gets directions to the underworld to consult the dead prophet Tiresias, who warns him of the horrific trials still to come. Next up, they have to sail past the Sirens, creatures whose bewitching songs lure sailors into crashing their ships. To survive, Odysseus makes his men plug their ears with beeswax, but he has them tie him tightly to the ship's mast so he can actually hear the legendary song without jumping to his own doom.
And right after that, we get the ultimate test of leadership. An absolutely impossible dilemma. On the right side of a narrow strait, you've got Scylla, a giant six-headed sea monster that guarantees the brutal loss of 6 men. On the left side, Charybdis, a massive, swirling whirlpool that risks consuming the entire ship and everyone on it. It's a lose-lose scenario. But true leadership sometimes means making the horrific, heavy-hearted choice to deliberately sacrifice 6 men to Scylla just to save the rest of the crew from total annihilation. And that brings us to Chapter 4, the final shipwreck. The exhausted crew decides to stop on the island of Turnassia, which happens to be home to the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios.
Now, the prophet in the underworld had explicitly warned them, whatever you do, do not touch those cattle. But a massive storm rolls in and traps them on this island for an entire month. Starving, desperate, and out of options, the crew makes the ultimate mistake. While Odysseus is off sleeping, again, they slaughter the sacred cattle and eat them. Well, that crime definitely does not go unnoticed. Furious, the sun god complains to Zeus, who retaliates by striking their ship with a massive thunderbolt as soon as they set sail. The ship is instantly torn in half. Every single crew member drowns. Poseidon's curse has fully come to pass, and Odysseus is now the sole survivor.
So, Odysseus is drifting entirely alone across the vast ocean, clinging to broken ship debris for 9 straight days, until he finally washes ashore on the island of the nymph goddess Calypso. 7 grueling years. That is exactly how long Calypso holds Odysseus captive as an unwilling lover. He spends literally every single day crying on the shoreline, staring out at the ocean, until the goddess Athena finally intervenes and begs Zeus to force Calypso to let him go.
At long last, we reach Chapter 5, Reclaiming Ithaca. But of course, Poseidon spots Odysseus leaving Calypso's island and completely destroys his makeshift raft out of pure spite. Odysseus washes up completely naked on the island of Scheria. Fortunately, he meets Princess Nausicaa and her parents, King Alcinous and Queen Arete. They are so incredibly moved by his epic, tragic tale that they finally, mercifully, give him a ship to take him home.
20 years. Think about that number. While Odysseus was out fighting monsters and angering gods, his wife Penelope has been waiting at home in Ithaca for 2 entire decades, somehow keeping hope alive. And she hasn't just been waiting peacefully either. She's been fending off over 100 aggressive, greedy suitors who have completely infested her palace. They're eating all their food, wearing their clothes, and aggressively demanding that she finally choose a new husband. But this situation brilliantly illustrates that cunning definitely runs in the family. Penelope perfectly matched Odysseus' intellect to buy him some desperately needed time. She promised these suitors she would finally choose a husband as soon as she finished weaving a burial garment for Odysseus' elderly father. But here's the trick. Every single night, she would secretly undo all the work she did that day. She managed to keep up this brilliant deception for 3 full years before she was finally caught by a treacherous maid.
But you know what? That trick bought exactly enough time. Step 1, Odysseus finally arrives and enters his own palace disguised as an old beggar, keeping the ultimate element of surprise. Penelope has set a final challenge, saying she'll marry the man who can string Odysseus's ridiculously stiff great bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through 12 axe heads. The arrogant suitors all try, and they completely fail to even string the bow. Then the old beggar steps up. Step 2, he strings the great bow with absolute ease. Step 3, he shoots the arrow perfectly through all 12 axes. And Step 4, with the help of his loyal servant Eumaeus and his now-grown son Telemachus, who had secretly hidden all the suitors' weapons, Odysseus traps them in the Great Hall and exacts total bloody revenge, eliminating every single suitor.
Finally, the palace goes quiet. The battle is over. After 20 long years of unimaginable suffering and loss, Odysseus stands before Penelope. Overwhelmed, she finally embraces the husband she has waited 2 full decades for. She looks at him and asks where he's been all this time. With tears in his eyes, he just replies, "Where do I begin?" It is such a powerful, tear-jerking testament to human endurance, intellect, and the absolute undying power of love. So, what should we really take away from all this? The Odyssey isn't just a fantasy story about fighting monsters. It's really about the sheer willpower required to navigate the brutal storms of life just to get back to the ones we love. So I'll leave you with this. What would you endure to find your way back home?